Recognize that your mental health is so important. If you don't, then I promise you'll be so distorted. Stiffened by your thoughts, that's a mental rigor mortis. I'm on a hard mission and it won't be aborted. Assorted memories will seem to be your remedy, but in your darkest hour, form into your enemies. Trust your gut, judge people off their energy. Cut them off quick and fast, they are limiting your room to grow.
You're listening to the Expect Effect podcast, where the concept of self-care is our primary focus. Consider this an acknowledgement of feeling, a judgment-free zone, the birth of every great idea within you. This is your weekly dose of me time, and I'm your host. It's Just Nikia. You can follow me on Instagram and Facebook at It's Just Nikia. You can also follow our personal pages for the show at the Expect Effect podcast on Instagram and Facebook. Listen, we know life is hard, but we believe self-care doesn't have to be. So sit back, relax, and unwind as we, together, uncover ways to truly expect better, do better, and believe better. We're on our second installment of a month-long series I'm doing here. So I'm doing 2 episodes per week, Sunday to Sunday. So you're getting 2 episodes this Sunday, 2 episodes next Sunday, and the Sunday thereafter, all the way through May 3rd. So you're also going to recognize on these split segments that you're going to get kind of some split intro segments. So you'll have to listen to each episode if you're wanting to get every piece of what I do every week. So I encourage you, tune in with these guests that I have. They're amazing individuals. You're going to pick up a lot of information, guys, and I'm only gaining traction. I'm only getting more ideas and finding new ways for us to connect and really become the best version of ourselves. So I promise this is something you don't want to miss. And plus, we're on lockdown as we speak, so I know there's not much else you can do. Sports canceled, outdoors canceled, restaurants canceled, okay? But the Expect Effect, we are still going strong. And most importantly, you still need to be feeding into yourself in every possible way. So definitely be sure you tune in for this. Now, also, I want to give a quick shout out to Voyage Dallas. That interview publication that I mentioned in some previous episodes has launched. You can check that link out in my page bio at the Expect Effect podcast. We have a link there to that interview. It'll give you insight into me, your host. It's Just Nikia, as well as my reasoning for creating the show and what I hope to ultimately achieve with this production. I think it was an amazing experience, truly humbled to have that kind of coverage at such an early start for this production. So I thought that was really, really dope. You guys, please go check that out. And I definitely want to give a quick shout out. Every week you guys come in and you hear a track, and I bet you're wondering, what is that called? That is called Mental Health, and my boy Sonnet, a member of the No Deal community, a childhood friend, an amazing talent. He is the voice you hear behind that track, and I promise you there are few I know as humble, as gracious, and as talented as he is. So I did just want to give a quick shout out to Sonnet for the use of that intro music. All right, this week we're recommending Artsy by Nature. Artsy by Nature is a body positive brand that focuses on uplifting, encouraging confidence, and bringing the focus of self back to people through handcrafted waist beads, anklets, crystal jewelry, sage smudge wands, and all things creative. The name Artsy by Nature derived from their core belief that everyone is blessed with their natural ability to do something. Their natural ability just so happens to be art, and through their handcrafted items, they welcome their supporters, what they know as the artsy tribe, into the world of artistic expression. Much like anything else, art translates differently from person to person, but their goal of instilling peace, confidence, tasteful sex appeal, and the perfect item for the day remains consistent throughout. While elevating the vibrations of the artsy tribe and other like creatives, they consider themselves the vibe dealers, as they hope to uplift the mood of their supporters in their everyday lives. So you can find a link to Artsy by Nature. Again, that's going to be some waist beads, anklets, crystal jewelry, and guys, sage smudge wands. And she has a wonderful rose sage smudge wand on her site. She is still in full production despite everything that's going on. So you can find the link to her site, Artsy by Nature, by visiting our show page bio. That's at the Expect Effect Podcast. It'll link you in directly to this week's blog page, where you'll find pictures of Artsy by Nature's work, some of her most popular items there as we've recognized them from the site, and you'll also find that same description we pulled from the website today. So definitely go get plugged in and support local businesses as much as you can, and smaller businesses during this time. Support your creative friends, support those who channel their expression artistically, and just really just support everybody as much as you can. Support one another, give as much as you can, feed into every area that you can. If you're still working right now, consider yourself very fortunate. We've hit an all-time high unemployment rate, which is to be expected in a situation like this. So just, remain humble, be gracious, help out where you can, support where you can. And if this is something you find yourself interested in, by all means. And the waist beads and anklets and bracelets, like I'm telling you, these are fashionable for either sex. It doesn't matter if you're male or female. There's no gender differentiations here. And then also, let's not talk about sage, okay? Like, anybody could use sage to clear out their homes, get some aromas, get some freshness, okay? So welcome that. She's such an amazing spirit. She's actually going to be on our show later. Not going to tell you when. That's going to be a surprise. But just know that I will be sitting down with the creator of Artsy by Nature, creator and owner, CEO, the boss in charge there, that she's going to be coming to sit down with us. So that's going to be a really cool experience. So be sure you check that out. And again, just be sure you're supporting as many local businesses, friends, and family as you can during this time. And definitely, of course, above all else, yourself. If you're not good, you can't help anybody else. So let's get right into it. This week's topic. It is what it is till it ain't. And I know, some of you may be wondering, what exactly is she saying? It is what it is till it ain't. I'm talking overcoming obstacles in any industry and learning to successfully create your own brand. So when we talk about creating in a space of isolation, or creating in spite of, exploring ourselves in spite of, the current circumstances, I would say, creating in this space in spite of, or, just say you're sick of your 9-to-5, you want to start that business, but you're unsure of where to start, or even worse, you're lazy, unwilling to steward over your current circumstances because you're too busy daydreaming about what could be if only you would properly apply yourself. You want better, you're believing for better, you're expecting better, but when it comes to the action plan, this area can be overwhelming and often overpowering, even for me. In fact, it is, and despite feeling confident that I know exactly where I want to be, I find that I'm still not always very sure of how to get there. Which also implies I've had to become very adaptable to change and even more comfortable with learning and retaining information, like every single day. And the reason being, this is an ongoing process, right? When we talk about overcoming standards set by those before us, negative ideals that may have been placed on us, and trying not only to make sense of our aspirations, but to effectively execute all that we aspire for, it really ties right in hand. And we've discussed the quote-unquote secrets to success, but your path will always be your own. And here at the Expect Effect, I want to increase your viability of the options made available to you throughout this life as you progress towards your goals. It is what it is till it ain't. It means sometimes the plan changes. It means sometimes your resources change. Sometimes life happens. It means sometimes you're forced to move forward in a completely unexpected way. And for those of you who are committed to seeing out this dream, no matter your circumstance, this is for you. When it comes to being able to professionally navigate in any situation while creating your own brand or building up that business, there are 4 key points worthy of consideration. First, you need to know and identify a need. Always keep the end goal in mind. Keep the consumer, listener, whomever you're targeting at the forefront of your thoughts. Focus on the bigger picture when creating. This is always the best starting point. It ensures you never lose sight of the original goal. Second, you need to consider uniformity. The power of same. Listen, social media handles, presentation, marketing strategies, signage, correspondence, signatures. There should be a uniform pattern to all of these items. If you pick a brand image, then roll with it throughout. If you pick a brand theme, then roll with it throughout. And that's not to say that you can't make changes or you can't evolve your branding. I think over the years, we've seen plenty of companies shift and modify their strategies. But if there are two things that they're always doing, it's they're keeping the consumer and that end goal in mind. Whomever they're targeting, they're keeping that in mind off top because they know that's what got them there, right? But the second thing they're doing is they're remaining uniform in their marketing and presentation, their social media handles, their correspondence. If you receive, if you're doing a job application for the company, the way that email comes back looks very similar to the email signage that might go out, even within the company, because there's that same logo, that same branding. So a uniformity to your brand is super, super important. I think also for people that don't know you, it shows a sense of structure for anyone who might be discovering you. They can already sense a form of consistency with you. And I think that's a quick and immediate way to build instantaneous rapport. Like you're off top, somebody's coming in and they're seeing organization, they're seeing structure, they're seeing, the layout, and they're saying, okay, I can trust this thing, not only by word of mouth, but of what I'm seeing and what they're producing. The third thing would be flexibility. Resources, procedures, and avenues will always change, okay? There will always be things that come up. Like it's inevitable. That's the story of our lives, the name of the game. If you remember playing the board game Life, part of the dynamic would be that when you spun the arrow or whatever it was, you didn't know exactly where you were going to land. It could be very unpredictable, and suddenly you had a choice to make. It is important that you be adaptable. It isn't always going to go exactly the way you pictured, and that's okay. It's about progress, not perfection. So take your time with it, develop patience, really learn your craft, really learn what you're driving yourself for. Learn yourself above all things. But when we're talking driving force and brand creation, just let it flow. Don't rush the creativity. Finally, know that timelines matter, and that time and organization essentially go hand in hand. When I say timelines matter, I'm not talking specifically scheduling, though scheduling is super, super important. Timelines in any sense are important, but most importantly, concrete timelines are important. And being able to set up the most concrete structure in your day-to-day and be as prepared as possible for changes that we may not expect or necessarily be ready for, but you've left yourself some room to potentially navigate that. Be honest with yourself about process completion times and what's required for your intended project or, whatever is taking place. There are always going to be questions you forget to ask. There's always going to be things you forget to prepare for and information you're not provided until you're further along your way. And this isn't necessarily a bad thing. If anything, it's the most common thing you'll see throughout this process. Organization is key. Be willing to learn, adjust, and make any necessary changes, but most importantly, back to it, don't rush. Allow the process to flow as naturally as possible. This isn't me telling you to take 3 years. Now hear me. This is not me saying take 3 years to produce something you're capable of producing in 1. This is me saying to place your desired timeline over the stability, durability, and fullness of this thing you're choosing to put into the world. If this is something you're truly passionate about, then there's no need to create unrealistic expectations. You're gonna be real with yourself if this is something you're really about. The best thing to do is to create a system that allows your time to work for you on a concrete day-to-day basis. If you're going to be with your partner this day, be with them this day. And I am guilty, myself, of still saying I'm going to do this thing, but allowing myself to be drawn into this other thing. Focus your attention on the moment. If you're writing, you're writing. If you're relaxing, you're relaxing. Really focus in. And then when it comes back to that creation and that structure, know that you need to identify a need and always keep the end goal in mind. Remain uniform in your brand structure. Remain flexible. Understand that resources, procedures, and avenues will always change. And adhere to the most concrete, day-to-day life timeline that you possibly can. And it's all going to be copacetic, baby. So this week we're stepping into full effect with a chiropractor. You know, I'm not even going to say his name. I will say his initials are DB, okay? And he is directly straight out of the UK. He joined us 7 hours ahead of schedule. He's a chiropractor there in the UK. He's originally a personal trainer, an amazing and phenomenal talent. You're going to love this conversation. You're going to live for this conversation. And to any creatives, anybody building, anybody just working in your day-to-day life, there is so much that you can pull from this and will gain from this. And I enjoy being able to speak with people who have worked for 15 plus years or 10 plus years or whatever the case may be, and have the feedback to give that even I don't, you know, just I'm still learning, still growing, and still trying to figure it out with you guys. And the cool thing is that life is a continued learning process. And so long as we remain in that mindset, we will always have the ability to experience and engage with one another in this way, because there's never a point that we're past engaging with our peers, growing, learning, or intaking information. So sit tight, relax, unwind, you know, take a little intermission break. I'm gonna let the music play for about 10 seconds. Get you a glass of water. Prepare to be overwhelmed and blown away with none other than...
Hi everyone, my name is Dean Blackstock. I'm a chiropractor from the UK. If you've seen me online, you'll probably know me as the Dapper Chiro, but you can just call me Dean.
Man, thank you so much for joining us, Dean. And you are 7 hours ahead of the US, so it is around 5 p.m. your time, and
It's getting up
around...
to about 5 o'clock, yeah.
Yeah, about 5 o'clock, and it's about 11 a.m. here. So thank you so much for working with me and coming up with a concrete schedule so we could do this, because I'm so excited. You would be like the first person I've talked to in this capacity. So this is really, really exciting. But also
Okay,
just,
brilliant.
yeah, amazing when we talk about creating your own brand, because you mentioned
Yes.
that you do have your own chiropractic company. So talk to me a little bit about what it was like establishing that for you and what led you to this path.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been a chiropractor for 15 years, and when I first graduated, I think, the process of going through chiropractic school was, pretty much let me teach you how to be a chiropractor and do chiropractic things, but maybe not run the business. So of course, coming out from university, I was a bit green around the edges and thinking, well, everyone's got a spine, everyone's got a back. Back pain's really common, so I put a sign up, I'll promote myself a little bit and I'll have people kicking down my door. And then quickly found out that that's not quite how things work in the real world. So you do have to kind of get into the marketing and the branding. So I've spent probably the past 7 years really developing that and just drilling down a little bit more into what I stand for as a chiropractor, what I personally believe, and then just trying to align those feelings and those beliefs with obviously what we do as a business.
I love your breakdown there where you said I'm really just diving into what I believe. For when it comes to producing something in mass quantity already, when we talk about chiropractic offices or
Yeah.
music or writing, there's a
Mm.
surplus of these things, right? So how
hmm
do you
hmm
then break into that narrative and create your own lane that involves really embracing individuality and creating a structure that's strong for you? So what led you to becoming more comfortable over a span of 7 years, really building on your brand for something you've been doing for the past 15?
That's a really good question, because I think this is where time does lend itself quite nicely, because it kind of came through almost like trial of error. You try certain things, you think, I worked in multiple different practices over the years. So I worked in a practice for about 8 years, and there were a lot of things that we did there that were fantastic. And there were some things that we did there which, were I did, but I didn't feel they were congruent necessarily with my own personal beliefs. So of course, when you start your own business, this is an opportunity now for you to do things the way you want. So you cherry pick the stuff you've learned, and then you look around and you see, what other people are doing that are successful, perhaps in your niche, in your industry, whether that be chiropractic or music or fashion or whatever. And then you put your own style to it. And that's just where you have to just be patient, because, building a brand, building a business does take time. And I think that in today's age where things happen so fast, that's one of the things I know when I speak to people in other fields, that they really struggle with is the time. It's like, how long is it going to take? How long is it going to take? What else can I do? Sometimes less is more. You just have to, you know, almost distill down what is it I really do believe, what do I want to do, how do I want to do it, and let me be patient in doing that. Let me give myself time to do it, and then you just, you build that into your content, you build that into your branding, and the rest hopefully will be, will be history, as they say.
I love that. I really, really love what you said there, especially in terms of just being patient. We do
Mm,
live in a society that is so high strung on instant
yeah,
gratification, and I have to have it now because you
yeah,
assume that's what's happening around you. You see people on social
absolutely.
media with their cars, their jewelry. You see people who you went to school with seemingly blow up overnight, and you have no idea their struggle because people don't know
Yeah,
yours. So that's
yeah.
really something I try to emphasize to people. But when you talk about building your brand based on
Mhm,
what spin you were able to put
mhm.
on it, and you identified the need, which, you said, hey, everybody has a spine. I want to do, something chiropractic here. I want to fix it,
Yeah.
which I think is amazing. I used to want to be a doctor, but in the medical field of any kind, I found I was just too squeamish. I just can't,
Okay.
I couldn't do it. So I
I hear you.
applaud
I
you.
feel you on that one.
But when we're talking about one key takeaway, I think people don't put into their brand work once they do identify a need and they decide, okay, I'm going to put my own spin on it. I think one
Mhm,
side they still miss is uniformity and the power
mhm,
of same. I have
mhm,
spoken to so
mhm.
many people who have 86 different social media handles and 16
Wow.
different, kind of images and marketing strategies. So kind of
Yeah.
talk to me a little bit about how consistency and uniformity has allowed you to reach the point you are now, especially considering just the start of your branding journey specifically
Yes.
7 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. That's such a good question because I still feel like 7 years in, I'm still figuring a lot of things out, and I'm still very much a work in progress. But I've certainly seen a lot of successes online in probably the past 8 months, 8 to 12 months, and that really has been, I think, just figuring out what is it that I believe and how can I portray that and sticking to that one thing. I think it is quite easy in today's age, particularly with the attention spans that we will have to try something, maybe not as get as much traction as we feel we want to get or we should be getting, and then we'll try something different. And then it's kind of rinse and repeat. We try something different and we keep trying something different. And then you end up with almost being that famous saying where it's like a jack of all trades and a master of none. You kind of end up diluting yourself down so much. People don't know really what you stand for. So I know when we look at the big brands that are out there, and I love fashion, right? Zara, I think you guys must have in America, right? We have that over
Yes,
here.
yes. Oh my
One of my favorite
goodness.
stores, right? I could spend all day in there.
I
They do lots of
online
different
shop
things.
mostly,
Oh, do
so
you?
yes.
They do lots of different things, but they have a particular theme. Now, the other stuff that they've done or that they do, I'm sure they've been able to do as a result of their success. They did the one thing first, and they've added other stuff to that. So I think when, like for me, building this brand, it's like, well, even if I do want to try the things, I have to keep just reining myself back in and just being like, focus on the one thing, focus on the one thing. Once that starts to build traction, then you can add other things to it. But I think to do too many things and to kind of lose that sameness, as you mentioned earlier, it can sometimes be detrimental because, as a consumer, when you're looking at a person's business or a person's brand, you want to get a really quick idea of what they are all about. And if you've diluted that because you've got so many different things going on, that's very difficult as a consumer to kind of buy into that. So for me, it's been really, really hard sticking to the same thing for a good chunk of time. And if you have to change, fine, but give it a really good chunk of time before you do that. But try and keep that continuity because that consistency is what's going to build success.
I really, really, the big takeaways I want to pull from that when you said less is more
Mm-hmm.
previously, and then to go on to say that you become a jack of all trades, but a master of none.
Mm.
So capitalizing on less is more to say, like, it's okay to feel sometimes that the idea isn't quite where you want it to be. And it's
Mm-hmm.
okay. You're gonna encounter moments I think you feel discouraged, you're
Of
tired,
course.
you're stressed,
Yeah.
you want
Yeah.
to quit. And I think overcoming those hurdles is how you learn to stop the process of rinsing and repeating.
Yes,
It's
absolutely.
not, it's nothing, it's really just building on what you've already created and not quickly saying, I'm going to jump ship, because there's something exciting and exhilarating about new things. I get it. You dive into a new project, you got a lot of hope, you got a lot of anticipation, and when you hit that wall, you've run out of all of those things. But talk
Yeah.
to me about how you've overcome hitting that wall to say, I'm going to stay dedicated, because it is hard. I understand wanting to switch and feeling like you have better ideas, but talk to me about what allowed you to really feed into it and say, you know what, I'm going to plant it here, and I'm going to
hmm
try to allow this to develop into everything it can be.
Mm. I've been, um, I guess I've been lucky to surround myself with some people that have given me good advice as well. So, I do take a lot out on board from friends and family and some business mentors, but um, being patient enough to say, well, okay, I'm going to give it 6 months trying this. And then in 6 months, we're going to review it and we're going to see what's been working and what hasn't been working. And if it needs to change, great, we'll change it. But if it doesn't need to change, okay, fine. We know that, we found something which is successful. At the heart of it all, and I think this is probably how I got into chiropractic. I got into it very much to help other people. So before I was a chiropractor, I used to be a personal trainer. So I've always been used to helping people and providing advice for them, right? And tips for them or whatever it might be. So with this whole branding thing, that this journey that we're going on and that I'm going on, it's been very much from the start. This isn't about me having, 10,000 followers or 50,000 followers or having a brand that's doing this, that, or the other. It's been how much value can I add to the market and can I create something that stands out? So when people see it, they think, great, do you know what? Yeah, I know what the Dapper car is about because he does X, Y, and Z. He's there to help me move well and to think well and to live well. That's what he stands for. I've very much put at the heart of it all, what can I do for the consumer, for the other person, as opposed to what am I going to get from this? That's enabled me then to kind of just try and stay. It's hard, it's still very much, I'm still a human being. It's hard sometimes when, you don't get as much traction as you want, or you put something up, you think, oh, that's not done as well as I thought it would be. And I put all that time and energy and effort into it. But you've got to be very selfless in the stuff that you're creating with the brand. So, you've got to make it all about the other person. And I think if you can do that and you can make that the heart and soul of what it is and tie that in with your own personal beliefs, then you'll be able to kind of get there. You'll definitely be able to kind of have that continuity, that success longer term.
I love that, because when you say you have to be selfless with it, I think as a creative, it's very easy to be self-critical. You're going
hmm
to beat yourself up over the work. And I think you have to give yourself enough leeway to know that there will be, unfortunately, no matter
hmm
how amazing you are, someone doing it
mm
better than you, someone that
Yeah,
you can find to say like, oh, I really need to be doing what they're doing, but staying
yeah,
grounded and staying true to your purpose and knowing that this is for who it matters to. This is,
yeah,
you have a purpose, you know what the end game is, and you know that there is someone, even if it's a few, that are being impacted. And I love what you brought
absolutely.
up about review points, just creating these general checkpoints.
hmm
What's working, what's not working. That's not even something I've thought about, but it's an exceptional point to make, of just setting up like, hey, what are we doing? Did we see a shift here? Is this something we should bring back, depending on what your business strategy is or what your market is, or just even
Yeah,
in your
yeah,
day-to-day life, in your self-care routine, just checking in with yourself, checking in with what's going on and making sure that you're good in where you stand. And that leads
yeah.
me into a question regarding flexibility, because
hmm
things will change. And I think people have a fear when it comes to being adaptable. So when you
mm
talk about creating these review points, what allowed you
Yeah.
to remain flexible and not so stingent on saying like, you know, maybe this is something I don't want to change. You know, maybe I'm really, really about this, but clearly it isn't working, or somewhere along those lines.
I think, I mean, it's so pertinent in today's kind of era with what's going on in the world at the moment to be flexible, right? Because there's so many things that are out of your control. And I think if you try and control every single aspect of life, you'll just burn out. And well, we all know what happens to people when that happens. So I think you've got to be flexible enough to say, well, okay, these are the things that are important to me. Let me put them into action, and let me give myself time to see if that's going to work. But also flexible enough to say, well, okay, if that isn't working and that's something that I really want to do, I've got a choice to make. Either I'm going to continue to do it regardless, or I'm actually going to change it. Now that's something which, you have to have a conversation about with yourself. But I think it's important, if you are trying to make an impact, to try and put, like I say, other people first. And I think that, if they need you to be flexible, so you're having a conversation with someone, if they don't get it, then you've got a duty almost to say, well, okay, how can I explain this differently? How can I explain it better? How can I help you understand it? If you stay so fixed and so rigid, you'll both be like, rutting stags. You'll both be like banging your head against a brick wall. So you've got to be flexible enough to say, well, okay, the stuff that's important to me, I definitely want to, I want to do it this way. If it's working, great. If it isn't working, I'm either going to continue to do it and, okay, I'll suffer the consequences, or I'm going to have to take a step back and think, how can I change it? How can I make it better? What is the market telling me? What's the consumer telling me? What are people around me saying? Take some of that advice on board and use it for your advantage, because it can only make you better in my eyes.
That is very true. And I think one big takeaway for on a global scale, and as definitely here in the US, it's visible what happens when businesses aren't willing to be flexible, right? You
Mm.
see it immediately in the introduction of a new brand or a new service that is offering very similar, if not the same things that they're
Hmm.
offering, but all of a sudden they're doing it so much better because they
Yeah.
were willing to be adaptable and because they were willing to be flexible. They're able
Hmm.
to become more accommodating when times change. So you
Yes.
have to be willing to move around just really to keep your head above water in the event of a crisis, in my opinion. I think if
Yes,
you're not
absolutely.
evolving, shifting, or changing, like you're really setting yourself up for failure. That
Yeah.
being said, when we talk about generating a setup,
Hmm.
timelines matter. And I know timelines can be broken, but time and organization, I think, essentially go hand in hand. So,
Hmm.
what have you found in trying to structure? Because when we talk about owning a business, I know you're a dad. You're,
Yeah.
content creation, branding, your husband. Where do you find just the line of balance? And when you create timelines, how do all of these things play into that?
Mm. This has been probably one of the bigger challenges over the recent years, I think, is trying to fit that all in. Like you say, just being a dad, still doing my job, because I'm ultimately here to treat and help people. So that's my bread and butter. And then the other stuff on social media is almost like the jam on top of the bread and butter. So I have I don't have rigid times, but I have times where if I'm in clinic, that's where you'll see me. That's where I'm in clinic. I'm not being a dad. I'm not doing any content creation. I'm literally in clinic. If I'm at home and it's a weekend, I'm not doing any work. I'm not doing any of the content stuff. I know I'm being a dad. I'm trying to be as present as I can be in those times. And then, where I schedule time to kind of sit down and go through some of the stuff that I need to do on the business with the branding, that's where I'm focused. So of course, life happens, and I've got, sometimes there's parents' evenings, or there's meetings I got to hold at work, or um, you know, anything can happen. So I try and have as much time to do the things that I want to do when I need to do them, and then obviously there's flexibility within that. So I try not to move things around, but very much like, if I'm in clinic, I'm in clinic. If I'm at home, I'm at home. If I'm working, then I'm working. And I try and keep the three as separate. Um, it's it's never going to be I'd love it to be like a real easy balanced process. But that's just not the world we live in. Sometimes you've got to go really hard with work. Sometimes you've got to go all in with your family. Sometimes you've got to go all in on the business. So there are times where it's not a straight split between those three things. It's sometimes a bit more and a bit less of others. But having those boundaries in at least gives you a framework. And I think that's really important, because that does keep you, it keeps you on that road to being consistent. And I think, when we go back to what we're speaking about, which is building that brand and that business, then that's what's going to help you in the long term.
And talk to me a little bit about when you do have to decide that we're going all in on the business, or this is all in on family right now. There
Hmm.
are obvious catastrophic life events that will pull us in one direction or another. those things excluded, what do you think are some key factors that allowed you to know just when not necessarily anything big happened, but maybe you saw the buildup of a situation and it allowed you to restructure and say, okay, this is where I need to put my attention? Because I know some people will say, I simply don't even know how to identify that point or what that might look like for me.
Mm. This is where I think, like I said earlier, having people around me that can just, give me some heads up, because you can't always see the wood for the trees. It is very hard when you're in it and working on stuff to fully kind of appreciate other areas sometimes. So, I do listen to my other half. Sometimes she's like, we haven't seen you for a little while. You've been doing this and the other. It's like, okay, I get where she's coming from. She's clearly seen me working hard, so I now need to take a bit of a step back, right? Or, with work, I'll be looking at maybe some of the KPIs we put in place and just analyzing some of the stuff. And it's like, do you know what? I've taken my eye off the ball a little bit here. I need to delve back into that. So I think there are some black and white things that you can put in place from a business perspective, like with KPIs and those monthly maybe meetings or checkpoints where you can just take a step back and just look at what's going on business wise. Life is a little bit harder, I think, because it's not always that easy to see it when you're in it. So that's where, if you can surround yourself with good people, then you can have those conversations, because they can often look from the outside in and say, do you know what? I've noticed X, Y, and Z is happening with you. And you can think, do you know what? I didn't even notice. Now that I've got that awareness, at least I can do something about it. But it's difficult to know when you're in it sometimes where those points are. So I do little things personally, like journal, and I try and, exercise for me is a big one, just to break out from that. And that gives me clarity of thought where I can just take a step back from everything and just not think about things. And that definitely helps. But certainly surrounding myself with friends and family that give me feedback. I don't always listen to it, but at least it's there. And if I choose to listen to it, I think it will help me.
I feel that 110%. I've spoken on it before. Having a tight inner circle, just a select group of people, family typically, that encourage you, that support you, and that are standing back to back with you and
Yeah,
able to call you out when things are happening. And you're right, you may not always listen, but it has been presented and you are given that opportunity to change, because
yeah,
life is difficult. It will
yeah,
catch you in the fire. If it wasn't possible for people to get careless, conversations like this wouldn't even exist. So
exactly.
it's definitely one thing to, say like we have to come in and possibly make a shift based on knowing what's going on around you. In closing, do you mind telling us a little bit about how you've been able to shift and adapt to the current climate, considering everything that's happening?
Whew, wow. Yes, we have been working hard kind of to just, I think, just to be able to reach people in like an online way. We live very much in an online world, but so much of my work very much is done one to one with the interactions that I have with people. So treatment aside, a lot of those interactions we can still have over, Skype, or you can use Zoom or whatever it might be. So there's stuff that we're doing, I guess, business wise to adapt. And really, for me personally, I'm just trying to add as much value as I can to the market as I possibly can. So I've got a lot more time on my hands currently, because obviously we've shut the clinic down during this whole pandemic. But I'm just trying to think, well, okay, what conversations do I have with people? What conversations would I be having with people? If I were face to face with them right now and we were talking about what's happening in the world, how can I then use that to create some content that might help someone? So it's more of the same, but just now, doing it much, much more consistently. And then obviously from a business perspective, it's just making sure that we are able to be kind of reachable and contactable online, so we can still have those interactions. Because like I say, treatment aside, a lot of the work that we do very much is in the conversations that we have. So a lot of that we can still do over, obviously, online.
And then also, one thing I want to know, what is, if you could go back in time, just the
Mm.
last question, and tell yourself one thing when you were starting out and attempting to create a business and a brand for yourself, even as a personal trainer, what is one thing you would have told yourself?
Start now, be patient.
I love it. Start now, be patient. That, man, a lot of it, there's so much that can be unpacked from that statement. A lot of people are just simply scared to get started.
Right?
Even me, like you're just always so scared to take off. And then when you do, you feel like, I think because you put so much on the line emotionally, at times
Yes.
financially, you have to see it right now. But to
Yeah,
say that I'm going
absolutely.
to get started, I'm going to be dedicated to the process, and I'm going to be patient. So just to
Absolutely.
recap, everyone, we know that we need to identify a need, always keep our end goal in mind. We need to remain uniform in how we present our brands and our message. We need to remain flexible and know that timelines do matter, but timelines are more along the line of being organized and creating a form of consistency. You're not always going to adhere to what's on the schedule, but you do have the opportunity to make sure that things are running as smoothly as possible on a day-to-day basis. Dean, let the people know one more time where they can follow you and anything else you'd like to share.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much. They can find me on Instagram, at Dapper Cairo, and the same on Facebook, all the same handles. Um, I guess one last thing for me. Thank you so much for having me on. It's a real pleasure. It's been an honor. I love the podcast, so keep churning out the content because I personally find it valuable, and I'll keep sharing it with my friends and family. So, to everyone out there, if you're
Man,
thinking about starting something, just get started. Be patient,
this was
just give it time,
amazing.
and then and have that trust. You'll be fine.
Trust. Oh my God. I could build a whole episode on that. And when I do, I feel like I'm going to need to call you back. So I look forward to
Anytime.
seeing everything that you do. I love your feed and your positivity, your uplifting messages. I'm a person that believes strongly also in just making sure that my home is good. So when I
Yeah.
see you with your family or just engaging there, it makes my heart smile. So thank you so
Oh,
much for
that's
joining
brilliant.
us.
That's a
Guys, this
real
has been
pleasure. Thank
another
you again.
week. Yes, sir. This has been another week of expecting better, doing better, and believing better. I'm your host. It's Just Nakia. Be sure to follow me on Instagram and Facebook at It's Just Nakia. But most importantly, I'm not the show. So be sure to follow at the Expect Effect podcast on Instagram and Facebook. We'll see you next week.